My name is RG, and over the last year, there have been many clickbait videos saying that Fortnite has died, which obviously is completely untrue. It's still without doubt one of the biggest games out there. However, it's far from its peak, when near enough everyone out there was playing the game. And during the last week, there's been a lot of discussion online about the reason for Fortnite's decline, with much of this talk stemming from that Denver guy, who in his 10 things we need, or Fortnite is done forever video, stated that overbuilding is the biggest reason for Fortnite's decline, with turbo building being the main culprit for this. So in today's video, we're going to be diving deeper into this subject, taking a look at some of the key points raised, and deciding whether turbo building is indeed the biggest factor in Fortnite falling off, and not feeling as magical as it did back in its heyday. So let's start off by showing you exactly what he said.
We need to stop overbuilding. I don't mean stop building. I mean stop even the worst of players being able to spam an entire box of protection in half a second. Everybody says they want old Fortnite back. How many times have you heard that the game is different now? This is why. Spam building is why Fortnite feels so different now, and why greats like Shroud and Dr. Disrespect never will stick with it. Nobody used to spam build, and you OGs remember this, but we had to click or hit a button every time we wanted to play something. Fortnite used to be a shooting game with an awesome, unique building mechanic. Now it's a building game with a shooting mechanic.
Actually, I do agree with a lot of what that Denver guy says here. The addition of turbo building meant that anyone who put in effort to learn how to build would be able to pick it up relatively easily. It was no longer for the most skilled players, especially on console, where it was particularly difficult to build on. As someone who played on Xbox using a controller back then, I know how difficult it was to build well before turbo building. I'd say that I'm a pretty decent builder nowadays, but back then it was completely different, as shown by some of these background clips. Interestingly though, turbo building was added to help less skilled players be able to actually build, and with it lowering the skill gap, it's understandable why Epic might have thought this was the right idea. However, ever since it was added, as well as other improvements to building that I'll discuss later, gun skill has become progressively less important. Instead, building has become the single most important part of being successful at Fortnite, which I believe is the primary factor in driving away a large chunk of Fortnite's casual playbase. The people that would hop on once a week for a few chilled games with their friends. And trust me, the vast majority of basically any game out there is made up by casuals. So if your game has alienated large portions of its casual playbase, then it's inevitable that the game will see a decline. A lot of these players didn't want to spend time practicing building, so suddenly, if you were one of these players that preferred to focus on the shooting much more than the building in Fortnite, then you were going to struggle, and inevitably enjoy the game a lot less. And this in turn is what also scared off a lot of new players as well, as they wouldn't be able to translate their general shooter experience into Fortnite and do well, like they probably would have been able to do in other games. And that's simply due to Fortnite's building mechanic becoming the most essential part of the game. By introducing turbo building, Epic wanted everyone to have a good chance of being able to protect themselves, which definitely worked. As soon as turbo building was introduced, building became so much easier. It felt incredible, but what it did was help to introduce the turtle meta, which funnily enough has been something that Epic have been trying to figure out effective ways to counter ever since. They've dabbled with weakening builds, buffing SMGs, making explosives go through materials, and even heavily nerfed turbo building itself. However, almost all of Epic's attempts to counter turtling were met with a hugely negative response from the player base. Whilst that Denver guy primarily blames turbo building for Fortnite becoming too focused on the building rather than the shooting, I think he's made a few key oversights. Because turbo building is only one of many ways Epic made building easier, and therefore more heavily used. I can't speak for PC, as I didn't play on it back then, but during the early seasons of Fortnite, there was a delay before you could actually build. You would press B or circle to pull out the build menu, but it wouldn't be a second or two until you could actually start building. And for a long time now, the most common defensive tactic has been to build as soon as you get shot at. But back then, when there was a delay before you could actually build, this wasn't always the best thing to do. At least not on console. But then Epic finally decided to reduce the delay before you could build, around Season 3. I remember the day they changed this. Suddenly, building felt incredible. At this point, there was no excuse to not build as soon as you were shot at, as you could build a wall to protect yourself almost instantly. And from then, the way that players would engage with each other changed dramatically. Back in the early seasons of Fortnite, players would go to the circle, build a base, and then fight your opponents from there. I remember how me and all of my friends would judge a player's skill by how good the base was. So if we ever saw a squad with a huge base, we would be instantly scared of them. It might sound crazy, but that's how the game was back then. But as soon as they removed the building delay and introduced turbo building, Fortnite stopped being about building bases, and instead became more about build fights. But Epic didn't stop there. They also introduced Builder Pro for controller, which had a huge impact on the game, at least on console, which obviously is where the majority of casual Fortnite is played. This made building much easier for almost everyone, which naturally increased the prevalence of building in the game, with many suddenly able to build at a much higher skill level than in the early days. And nowadays, the game has gotten even more advanced with the box fighting meta, with quick edit plays becoming a staple of high level gameplay. And honestly, this is a big reason why I love the game. Fortnite was able to evolve. Its unique combat style is what makes the game exciting for me, and I suspect for a lot of the people still playing the game. But that doesn't mean that everyone liked how Fortnite evolved. And unfortunately, a lot of these players ended up leaving the game altogether. But there are some people out there that believe that the introduction of creative is actually the root of the game's problems, with it allowing everyone to practice the 90s and 1v1s, which has undoubtedly had a huge impact on Fortnite. However, I don't think creative's impact on the game is anywhere near as big as the introduction of turbo building and other buffs to building, because at the end of the day, people were always going to improve at the game. If they weren't going to practice in creative, then they would have just done it in pubs or scrims. I mean, how many people back then would go to Wailing Woods so that they could get a ton of wood and practice the builds? I know that I did. I think creative mainly accelerated the skill development of players, but players would have gotten really good even without it. However, without turbo building, suddenly building would be a lot harder for everyone. Sure, the skill gap would be higher, but I believe that the average skill level would be much lower, with building not being anywhere near as effective for a lot of players. But what can Epic do? Will we be able to get Fortnite back to the purity of its early days? Well, ultimately, I think we're past the point of no return. I don't think that it would be realistic to expect Epic to remove turbo building. It's been in the game way too long, and it would most likely drive away a lot of the remaining players. Instead, I think we just need to accept that this is what Fortnite is like now. We're never going to get back to the early days of Fortnite, but honestly, I'm okay with this. Games change, that's just life, and frankly, if the game had remained all about building forts and camping in your base, who's to say that people wouldn't have just gotten bored with that anyway? The days where it would seem like anyone and everyone will be playing Fortnite are long gone. But as long as Epic keeps introducing fun and new ways to innovate the game, whilst keeping to the core of Fortnite, then I think we'll be just fine, and Fortnite will continue to be successful. So, what do you think about this topic? Would you like to see Epic remove turbo building? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you want to support me as a content creator, then feel free to use my creator code, which is on the screen now. So anytime you buy something in the item shop and use my code, it'll go directly towards supporting the channel, which would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe for more. And I'll see you next time for another video. Goodbye.